Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Anyone else have particularly strong draws to places? For the longest time, since early childhood even, I've had a very large pull towards these kinds of landscapes, particularly Ireland, Pick. I couldn't tell you for the life of me why, but there's something about the land that has always intrigued me. Early childhood, I took every magazine and picture book I could on places like this. And now, years later, I still find myself almost desperately wanting to be there. As I said, there is no legitimate reason I can come up with, however, except maybe an extreme and warped sense of wanderlust. All the same, the eerie sense of home is unmistakable and almost insatiable now. I'm unsure what to do except try to go there sometime. Anyone else have a similar feeling or experience towards someplace? It's hard to explain, but you'd know the feeling without a doubt if you've already experienced it. The surreal nostalgia it offers is damn near maddening.
I'm from South America, and I've always been drawn to Langley, Virginia. Every time I see it in a film or TV, I think to myself, home, and I get this warm feeling in my chest. Also, I'm drawn to the American suburbs. It makes me feel so happy. Maybe it has something to do with past lives.
I feel this way about Northern Europe and Scandinavia, and I have for a long time. I think it has more to do with ancestry and bloodlines than past lives.
This would be my theory as well. I live in Australia, but all my ancestry is Northern European, and I have this really strong emotional pull towards Northern European culture, landscape, mythology, environment, history, etc. To the point where I feel this strong, sometimes almost painful yearning to be there instead of stuck half a world away on a hot, dry landmass. It sucks because I can't figure out any practical way to relocate my life there. But except for a few months in winter, when everything is green and there's a lot of mist and rain, I feel so out of place here in Australia.
For me, it's a bit complicated. There's something in my mind since my childhood I can't seem to see or find. Sometimes when I gaze at the moon for a little moment, I can see the place I'm being drawn to. It's not a particular place. It's something I can't just explain. Something so beautiful. It shakes me whenever I get the feeling of it or see it in front of my inner eye. It's really hard to explain for me. The moon is a wonderful object for me. It's not exactly what I'm looking or searching for, but it can sometimes give me the feeling I have whenever I remember that place I'm looking for. It can be anywhere, the place I'm talking about. For example, the picture of OP is beautiful. It almost brought it up again.
My sister and I are fascinated by the derelict home of our great-aunt in southwestern France. It is hidden in the corner of a silent neighborhood. In front of it, there is an area of twig-strewn ground from which grow several tall and dry sweet gums. All the houses are a dusty white. They were built in the 50s and are covered in small cracks. They kind of seem out of place, like something out of the Soviet Union, but less cold. The interior is very simplistic, and most of the somewhat tattered furniture dates from the 50s and 60s. The tiling on the floor is composed of small squares, mostly off-white but also black, red and blue. The whole place seems untouched by modernity. As the backyard, its ground is burned and sandy and populated by mice and snakes. On the sides of this desert are several large hydrangea bushes. Against the wall are unkempt roses and rusty gardening tools. The house has an inexplainable charm, that of a simple way of life. I also like it because it is a time capsule stuck in the past, and it is the only window through which I can see the remnants of my Pied Noir heritage. The European settlers of French Algeria, who were expelled after independence. Everywhere there are photos and objects of a society which doesn't exist anymore. This house for me is a kind of sanctuary where I can reconnect with my roots. It's hard to explain, but it has a lot of emotional importance for me. My great-aunt gave me a medal my grand-uncle had received, that of a military brigade whose goal was to protect Saharan nomads during the war.
When I was 4, my mom told me we were moving to Tennessee, near Big Bear in California. I told her I was excited because I saw a lot of green. Now I live in a concrete jungle and I hate it. I desperately want to return to nature.
glades, pine forests, old cabins, and barns. I've always remembered seeing an old shed like this in the middle of a clearing in the woods with wheat growing everywhere from when I was really young. I assume it was a dream, but I remember it very vividly. I don't like to sound like a hippie, but I feel a very strong attachment to places like that. It bothers me when my friends go in the woods because they just like to hack down trees with their machetes the entire time. I don't think any of them have any appreciation for how beautiful nature is.
I hate when I'm out just trying to enjoy the silent beauty of nature, and then friends and family have to step on everything and take 100 photos of everything, as if they can only see through the lens of a camera. Also, I am also drawn to the type of area you described, but that is mainly because I grew up in rural Texas. That said, I too feel attachments to quiet fields, and these quiet fields always have one single little shed or small cabin in the middle of them for some reason.
Brit here, I find myself very much drawn to the heavily wooded areas of the New England, the Pacific Northwest, and Canada. Every time I see these places on the TV, ever since being a kid, I just want to be there. I once spent a month in Canada traveling across the country and absolutely loved it, especially Northern Ontario and British Columbia. I had a really hard time leaving, so much so that I seriously considered just disappearing into the wilderness. That was 9 years ago. I wish I had the money to go back. This country is nice and everything. I appreciate our culture, history, and landscape, but it just isn't any of those places. They feel like where I should be, and every time I'm reminded of them, I yearn for them terribly.
Looks like one of the roads near my house, minus the majestic mountain hours a little smaller because of the high altitude our valley is in. I live in northern Washington in one of those campy small towns ripe for a Hollywood horror movie. Instead, nothing happens here, ever. If you ever get the chance to go back, I'd suggest going hiking in Glacier National Park. It'll make your heart explode. Just be sure to hire a guide or find a local who knows the area, or you'll end up dead or lost.
I completely get that feeling. I always get a sudden pang of nostalgia for a field and area similar to OP's pick, but not so hilly. But I can't recall ever visiting an area like that. Every time I go somewhere new, it's like I'm looking for that place, but can never find it. It's always so quiet.
I'm the exact same as you, OP. I'm from Dublin, but I feel really drawn to the west of Ireland where I went on vacation a lot as a kid. It really is a beautiful place, but it's always rainy. Plus, I'm drawn to the Irish countryside in general.
Up here. Surprised this thread expanded. Nice and interesting work, anons. I'm jealous. Just to step foot in that country is all too alluring. I'm impressed that so many share something of the similar sentiment, namely with the green and fertile lands and forests. I wish I could put a name or term to the feeling, but I can't really come up with anything new that I haven't already anyway. All I know is, when I get there, to this place, I feel that for some reason, it's destined for me to die there. The landscape and such is so beautiful and alluring, but despite how enchanting it is, and how much I want to be there, I always envision the endgame of it being my death there, or my dying there. I feel so strangely braced for it, although I'm sure when I actually got there I might change my mind. All the same, I feel that to go there is simply to go there to die. I guess it's just where I want to be when death comes. On a bit of a side note, as I've grown up attached to this landscape, I've also grown very fond of Irish folklore and have studied up quite immensely on it. I'm sure that in some sense that plays a big part in the feeling too. I have no way of knowing for sure.
I'm from North Ireland. My first holiday was in the west of Ireland. Heck, I was probably even conceived in the west of Ireland. I'm always drawn back to the south and west of Ireland. We keep going back for holidays. The green, the purity of everything, the small communities, and the smell of turf being burned. I want to buy a small derelict house and do it up and use it as a holiday home, a place to just go and spend time alone. I'm also attracted to the north of Scotland, which I've been a few times, especially the forested areas. I want to visit Scandinavia and also British Columbia. I'm really attracted to forests and want to spend a lot of my time in them. I'm actually thinking of doing a forestry degree in Scotland after my biology degree.
You and I, OP, are somewhat similar. It is one of my goals in life to visit the northern parts of Ireland, but I know why I am drawn there. According to my previous experiences, it is related to a past life of mine that still influences this one. I, or someone who is important to me, is buried somewhere around there, and for some reason I must visit that place. I think what I'm looking for is somewhere in the northernmost parts of the island. That much I gathered from many hours of meditation and asking for guidance. I don't need further details, though, because it's not my conscious everyday mind that's searching. I know I will feel exactly where to go when I get closer, so I will go with the flow and see what I shall see. I wish that all of you people visit your own places and find whatever you need to find.
Why do you like nature more than people?
Nature never told me to pay taxes.
Because modern society does not represent my values and ceased representing them long ago. I have accepted that I cannot find reasonable common ground with people who subscribe to such a lifestyle, and I find it hard to be around them. I find normalcy and peace in nature and with people who enjoy nature.
Nature is the constant, the unchanging, and pretty much the default form of existence. We as humans like to take control and change the world we live in. But by doing that, we make it complicated, confusing, and obtuse. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're at, and what you have or what you don't have. You can always return to that constant as it lies underneath the facade of society we've built. I think it's no surprise that people who've never experienced the constant, let alone established a relationship with it, are unhinged, neurotic messes.
Because nature brings me peace and makes me alive, it's also quiet. And farther I am from people, the more I can see the stars. And I really like stars. People are loud, I find them annoying, and they commit crimes a lot, which I don't like. I happen to think big cities are a crime against humanity and the natural world, if I'm honest.
People are often loud, overbearing, and only seem to be getting angrier and more on edge. I often feel like I don't fit in, or that there isn't a place for me in most social spaces. Even in the company of kind, generous folk who I might otherwise enjoy, I often feel like I'm intruding, infringing, or otherwise inconveniencing them in some way. Probably my own insecurities bleeding through. Guess that's something I need to work on and make peace with. Nature doesn't impose any of these feelings upon me. I feel that, in some sense, I'm meant to be there. I feel comfortable and without pressure to present myself a certain way. Both cities and nature are teeming with life. With the former, it's very in your face and you're forced to partake. With the latter, it's vibrant and lush, but just barely perceptible beneath the surface.
I was born in Chicago, and when I was 7, my family moved to Rochester, New York. Thanks, Kodak. Every year, probably twice a year, we'd drive from Rochester to Chicago to visit family. Summer, Christmas, sometimes spring break. It was an 11-hour trip in the car, and my sister and I slept most of the time, but always I would either be awake or wake up right at Toledo, Ohio, even if it was 4 a.m. My mom said that I always asked about Toledo, even when I was 7 or 8. And as I grew up, like 10 or 11, I always told people I would live in Toledo one day. I mean, Toledo? Who the hell dreams or predicts living in Toledo? I knew zero about it, had never been there. But whenever I made wishes or threw a coin in a fountain, I would say, I wish I could go to Toledo. Cut to my junior year of college. Fascinatingly enough, I went to Bowling Green, about a half-hour south of Toledo. But even more interesting, I met a guy that grew up his whole life in Toledo that I ended up marrying, and sure enough, after we got married, we lived for a short time in Toledo. Then got the hell out of there as fast as possible.
What if people just went back to nature? Like a majority of people just go back to living off the land away from society and government, like farming and hunting and such. Would the government try to stop us? Would there even be a government or need for one?
You can't just go back to nature anymore. The powers that be have released so many genetically altered plants that it's becoming impossible to farm for yourself like the old days. Hard to sow a crop when last year's didn't produce any seed. In 100 years or so, there might not be any plant life left on this planet that can produce seed. You'll be forced to buy clones or patented seeds. Same goes for animals. We're already to the point where chickens cannot survive in large groups without regular injections.
Implying I have to buy seedless plants. Implying I have to have large groups of chickens. Fuck you. Farmers and homesteading anons need to rise up and return to our roots. It's literally the only way to avoid the impending collapse of the failing infrastructure that has a stranglehold on the modern world. Buy a plot of land somewhere rural. Buy cows. Buy geese. They can graze natural grasses. Buy chickens. They kill pests. Buy easy-to-grow vegetables. Potatoes, onions, carrots, whatever the fuck else. And just live. You may need some money to start. You may need some work to build the farm structures. Fences, a small pond, even just a seasonal one. A well, if possible. But I swear to God, the fruits of your labor will far exceed the cost when the modern world goes tits up. Oh yeah, and bring a gun.
I know it is unrealistic, but I just want to escape into the noise of trees, water, and wind, into the depths of greenery, the distance of fields, the infinity of the sky, far from the conscience of all who have ever known me and where they will never find me. I want nothing to return to nature, the purity, tranquility, freedom, and completeness of the animalistic state of the human being and spirit, where the wonder of existence is reduced to the joy of instant survival itself, back to the Garden of Eden. I want to survive as a strong individual in harmony with the immediate laws of nature, to return to the innocent, instinctive, impulsive state of mind that only children have, to that primordial equilibrium where they spiritually and materially blend into the perfect whole of mythological symbols and forms. We come from nature. We have spent the overwhelming part of our existence as a species in it. Why do people find it such an unrealistic, immature, idealistic desire? Why is it bad if one does not have material and consumerist ambitions beyond what they need? Is it a bad thing that I don't ask for more than the godly given?
Had 3 mildly weird things happen lately outside the place I'm living. Decided to share and see what you guys think, and since this is what /x/ is for. I live on the 1st floor, and my landlord lives on the 2nd floor. I've lived here for about 2.5 years. I enter and exit from a door on the backyard side, and my bedroom window faces the backyard. Last weekend I was up late playing video games, go out periodically to smoke cigarettes, go out at some point when it was dark. Kind of hard to explain the way the property is arranged. It has a longer driveway than the houses next to it, so our backyard and side yard kind of go behind the backyard of the house next to us, which has a fence, and our backyard is actually touching the backyard of the house 2 doors down, which I guess is also further back from the road than the other properties, and is not separated by a fence, and is only delineated by a line of trees several feet apart, so anyone can walk through if they wanted. There are some wooded areas to the left and right of our backyard, but behind the backyard is just a row of houses on the parallel street, so it's not like we're facing the wilderness or anything. Anyway, I'm out back at night smoking a cigarette and hear the sound of something moving in the leaves in the line of trees separating the yards. Think nothing of it, because we get deer all the time. As I'm getting to go in, and just as I put my hand on the door handle, I realize it doesn't sound like a deer. It sounds like how a person would walk, so I stand there and watch as I hear the walking. In a large gap between the trees, I clearly see the silhouette of a person walking in the neighbor's yard right beside the trees in the direction of their house. Stand there for a moment. He's not in my view anymore. And then a moment later, the walking stops. Rationalize that it's probably just the neighbor doing some shit in his yard, and that's all it may have been, and go back inside. I heard the dog barking in the fenced yard of the house that's closer to the road, like the person continued walking along that edge of the other neighbor's property. The next day, I see my landlord picking up sticks in the backyard and ask if it was him, and he looks straight at me and slowly shakes his head. Explain what happened, and he just says, "That's weird." The next thing isn't really that weird, but I have to mention it. Wake up at like 4:30 a.m. to the sounds of some kind of moaning animals coming from what sounded like right outside my bedroom window. Thought I was hallucinating it in my waking state, but I recorded some of it. Sounded like moaning with an occasional cat-like screeching. Thought I could hear two animals at the same time, maybe two cats or a cat and a raccoon or a possum or something. Anyway, not that weird in hindsight, but spooked me at the time. Last thing, I just got home from work. It was night. I happened to see my landlord out front and he asked if I could turn off the hose in the backyard before I went in. So I went back in, turned off the hose, and started smoking a cigarette. I heard some rustling in the same line of trees, but I thought it just sounded like a small animal. Then suddenly, a patio chair on the far side of the patio table falls over for seemingly no reason, which has never happened in my time living here. Got spooked and decided to turn to /x/. As I'm typing this, I think maybe it has something to do with the hose that had been running, so I just went back out and look and see that indeed the hose had been draped over it. So I guess for some physics, friction, or probability reason, the chair just happened to fall over, about a minute after turning off the hose that was draped over it. But I typed all of this out, so I may as well post it, haha. Anyway, only other weird things that happened here. Had the day off, so I went to see Wrath of Khan, which was screening in theaters for its anniversary. Stop at a store on the way home to buy some shirts and decide to buy a scented candle. At night, light the candle for a bit, then stupidly blow it out instead of snuffing it out and the wax goes everywhere. Clean it up as best I can with many paper towels. That stuff wasn't really relevant, but I think they're fun details. Take garbage out since they're collecting the next day. The driveway is on the opposite side of the house as the incident with the silhouette behind the line of trees. The neighbors on that side had moved in only recently. There are trees between our houses on this side too, a little thicker. As I'm walking down our long driveway, I see two figures walking up along the side of that neighbor's house, one of whom has a flashlight. Figure maybe they dropped something and were looking for it. A little after I pass them, the flashlight is pointed toward me. I turn around and they're both facing me, walking toward me slightly, but from the other side of the trees still. One of them says what sounds like, "You giggling a little?" I say kind of indignantly, "What?" Then turn around and keep walking. They take their flashlight off me, and when I get to the road, I see a cop car parked at the curb. No one is in it, but the lights on top are flashing. Toss the garbage in the bin. Walking back up the driveway, I think the two guys were standing in the back of the neighbor's house and go inside, and that's that. Another time I happened to walk out back at night and see a row of evenly spaced lights moving slowly across the sky. Watched them for a bit, then ran inside to grab my phone. But when I went back out, they had already passed out of sight. Did a Google search and found that SpaceX had launched a bunch of satellites that might be visible in the night sky and were described as just what I had seen. Not paranormal, but yeah, pretty weird coincidence that I saw them at just the right time. That's all I got.
Rome. Whenever I read Livy, I feel like I can visualize every single thing in the setting down to minute detail.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.